What if some of the fruits you believe are healthy are quietly accelerating the very aging processes you're trying to slow down? Most men over 60 are told to eat more fruit, more fiber, more antioxidants, more natural sugar instead of processed sugar. And while that advice sounds harmless, even wise, here's what's really going on inside your body. After 60, your metabolism is not the same machine it was at 30. Insulin sensitivity declines, muscle mass drops, testosterone gradually decreases, the liver becomes more vulnerable to fat accumulation, and the pancreas, it has far less tolerance for repeated blood sugar spikes. So the question isn't, is fruit healthy? The real question is this fruit metabolically appropriate for a 60-year-old male body? Because fruit is not just vitamins, it's also fructose, and fructose is metabolized almost entirely in the liver. When your liver is already dealing with age-related insulin resistance, excess fructose can push it toward fatty liver, elevated triglycerides, and systemic inflammation. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your liver as a processing plant. When you're young, it has multiple conveyor belts running efficiently. But after decades of exposure to refined carbohydrates, alcohol, medications, and stress hormones like cortisol, some of those belts slow down. Now, when high fructose fruit arrives in large amounts, it overwhelms the system. Instead of being used for energy, it gets stored, often as visceral fat. And visceral fat is not passive. It's hormonally active. It drives inflammation. It lowers testosterone. It worsens insulin resistance. It increases cardiovascular risk. This is why fruit choices after 60 matter more than ever. But here's the empowering part. Certain fruits can actually reverse this trajectory. Some fruits support mitochondrial health. Some improve insulin sensitivity. Some reduce oxidative stress and protect endothelial function, which directly impacts blood flow, brain function, and even erectile health. In today's talk, I'm going to break this down clearly and precisely. We'll cover 4 fruits men over 60 should seriously reconsider, not because fruit is bad, but because metabolic context matters. And then we'll go deeper into 4 fruits that actively support longevity, hormone balance, liver health, and metabolic flexibility. This isn't about fear, it's about strategy. Because when you understand the physiology, when you understand insulin, liver metabolism, and inflammation, you stop guessing and start choosing foods that work with your biology instead of against it. And that's how healthy aging is built. Let's start with a fruit that almost everyone considers healthy, the banana. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat a ripe banana after the age of 60. A medium banana contains roughly 14–16 grams of sugar, with a significant portion coming from glucose and fructose. As bananas ripen, their resistant starch converts into rapidly absorbable sugars. That means the riper the banana, the faster your blood sugar rises. Now, in a 25-year-old with high muscle mass and excellent insulin sensitivity, that glucose is quickly shuttled into muscle cells. But in men over 60, muscle mass has often declined significantly. Sarcopenia reduces your body's largest glucose storage site. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your muscles are storage warehouses for sugar. When you're young, the warehouses are large and empty, ready to absorb incoming shipments. But as muscle mass declines, the warehouses shrink. Now when sugar arrives, there's less storage space. So where does the excess go? It stays elevated in the bloodstream longer. Insulin rises higher. And over time, repeated spikes contribute to insulin resistance. What the research consistently shows is that postprandial glucose spikes, especially repeated daily spikes, accelerate glycation. Glycation damages proteins, stiffens blood vessels, and contributes to cognitive decline and cardiovascular disease. But there's another layer. Bananas also contain fructose, and fructose, as we discussed, is metabolized almost entirely in the liver. In aging men, even mild fatty liver is common, sometimes without symptoms. When excess fructose reaches a liver already struggling with insulin resistance, it can increase triglyceride production. Higher triglycerides are strongly associated with increased cardiovascular risk and worsening metabolic syndrome. Now, does this mean bananas are toxic? No, but context matters. If you are sedentary, if you already have elevated fasting glucose, if you carry abdominal fat, if your triglycerides are elevated, a daily banana, especially in the morning on an empty stomach, may not be serving you. Here's the practical protocol if you choose to eat bananas. Only consume them after resistance training, when muscle glucose uptake is higher. Choose slightly green bananas, which contain more resistant starch and less free sugar. Pair them with protein or healthy fat, for example, half a banana with Greek yogurt or almond butter, to blunt the glucose spike. Limit portion to half rather than a full fruit. This is metabolic strategy, not restriction. And this is important. If this breakdown is helping you see food differently, consider subscribing. I share content like this regularly to help you understand what's happening beneath the surface, not just what headlines tell you. Now remember the principle here. The issue isn't the fruit alone. The issue is muscle mass, insulin sensitivity, and liver capacity. If you improve those through strength training, adequate protein intake, at least 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight daily, proper sleep, and time-restricted eating, your tolerance improves. But if you ignore the root cause and just assume natural equals safe, you may unknowingly accelerate metabolic aging. Bananas are convenient. They're marketed as heart-healthy. They're common in senior-friendly diets. But for many men over 60 with declining metabolic flexibility, they deserve careful consideration. Now let's talk about a fruit that many men consider harmless because it's mostly water. Watermelon. It's refreshing, hydrating, light, and often recommended in heart-healthy diets. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Watermelon has a very high glycemic index. That means it raises blood glucose rapidly. Even though its total carbohydrate load per serving may not seem extreme, the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream matters, especially after 60. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your bloodstream like a highway. When sugar enters slowly, traffic flows smoothly. When it enters rapidly, you get a metabolic traffic jam. Insulin has to surge quickly to clear that glucose. Repeated surges over years contribute to endothelial damage, the delicate lining of your blood vessels. And endothelial health is not optional after 60. It determines blood pressure regulation. It determines cardiovascular risk. It determines brain perfusion. It even determines erectile function. Now here's the nuance. Watermelon contains citrulline, which can support nitric oxide production, something beneficial for vascular health. That's often used as a selling point. But the dose of citrulline in normal servings of watermelon is relatively modest. Meanwhile, the rapid glucose spike is very real. What the research shows is that high post-meal glucose variability, not just average glucose, correlates with oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling. In aging men, oxidative stress accelerates mitochondrial dysfunction, which contributes to fatigue and metabolic slowdown. So the issue isn't simply sugar quantity, it's sugar speed. After 60, your pancreatic beta cells are less resilient. Your insulin sensitivity may already be declining. If you eat watermelon alone, particularly in the evening when insulin sensitivity is naturally lower, you amplify that stress. Now here's the practical strategy. If you choose to eat watermelon, keep portions small, about 1 cup maximum. Consume it earlier in the day rather than at night. Pair it with protein, for example, cottage cheese or a handful of nuts. Avoid drinking it as juice. Juicing removes fiber and accelerates glucose delivery even further. Better yet, if your fasting glucose is above 95 mg/dl or your triglycerides are elevated, consider eliminating it temporarily and monitoring how your body responds. And this is where root cause thinking matters. If your metabolic flexibility is strong, meaning you lift weights regularly, maintain lean muscle, sleep 7 to 8 hours, and avoid constant snacking, your tolerance will be better. But if you're sedentary and already dealing with abdominal fat, watermelon becomes less of a refreshing treat and more of a glucose spike in disguise. If this breakdown is helping clarify how aging metabolism works, consider subscribing. I share this kind of physiology-first guidance consistently to help you build strength and longevity naturally. Now let's examine a fruit that carries one of the strongest health halos in modern nutrition, Grapes, they're rich in antioxidants. They contain resveratrol. They're associated with heart health in popular media. And because they're small, people eat them mindlessly, handful after handful. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Grapes are one of the highest fructose-containing fruits by volume. A single cup contains roughly 23 grams of carbohydrates, much of it rapidly absorbable sugar. And because grapes lack significant fiber relative to their sugar load, they're extremely easy to overconsume. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine fructose as packages being delivered exclusively to your liver. Unlike glucose, which can be distributed to muscles, fructose must be signed for and processed by the liver alone. Now picture your liver at age 60. After decades of modern eating patterns, mild fatty infiltration is extremely common, even in men who appear lean. Studies estimate that a significant percentage of adults over 60 have some degree of non-alcoholic fatty liver, often undiagnosed. When repeated fructose loads arrive, especially in the absence of high physical activity, the liver converts much of it into triglycerides through a process called de novo lipogenesis. That increases circulating triglycerides, it worsens hepatic insulin resistance, and over time, it contributes to visceral fat accumulation. What the research shows is that high fructose intake, particularly in sedentary individuals, is strongly associated with increased liver fat and impaired insulin sensitivity. This isn't speculation, it's well-documented metabolic physiology. Now let's address the resveratrol argument. Yes, grapes contain resveratrol, a polyphenol studied for potential longevity benefits. But the amount in standard servings of grapes is relatively small. You would need to consume very large quantities to approach doses used in research settings. And here's the key principle: you cannot out-antioxidant excessive sugar. The metabolic cost may outweigh the polyphenol benefit. This becomes especially relevant for men over 60 who are struggling with abdominal weight, experiencing elevated fasting glucose, dealing with rising triglycerides, not engaging in consistent resistance training. In those contexts, frequent grape consumption may quietly worsen the very markers you're trying to improve. Now, I'm not advocating fear. I'm advocating metabolic awareness. If you choose to eat grapes, limit to a small handful, not a bowl. Consume them immediately after strength training when glycogen demand is higher. Never snack on them mindlessly in the evening. Consider pairing with protein to blunt glucose response. And here's something powerful. If you eliminate high fructose fruits for just 30 days and track fasting glucose and triglycerides, many men see measurable improvement. That's not magic, that's physiology. If this level of root cause explanation is helpful, consider subscribing. I post content like this regularly to help you optimize energy, hormones, and longevity without medication. Now we've covered bananas, watermelon, and grapes, fruits that can amplify insulin stress in certain metabolic contexts. Now let's examine the fourth fruit that often surprises people: pineapple. It's tropical. It's marketed as anti-inflammatory because it contains bromelain. It's often included in digestive health smoothies, and many men assume that because it's natural, it's metabolically gentle. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Pineapple has one of the highest glycemic loads among commonly consumed fruits. A single cup can contain over 20 grams of sugar, a mixture of glucose and fructose delivered quickly into the bloodstream. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of glycemic load as the total weight of sugar entering your system and glycemic index as the speed of entry. Pineapple delivers both, a significant load and a relatively rapid rise. Now imagine your pancreas at 65 years old. It has spent decades responding to glucose spikes. Beta cell function naturally declines with age. Insulin receptors may already be less responsive. So when a high glycemic fruit enters the system quickly, insulin must surge higher and stay elevated longer. Repeated cycles of this lead to something subtle but powerful: hyperinsulinemia. And chronic elevated insulin is not just about blood sugar. It suppresses fat burning. It promotes visceral fat storage. It interferes with growth hormone signaling. It may contribute to lower testosterone over time. What the research consistently shows is that chronic insulin elevation, even before full diabetes develops, is associated with increased cardiovascular risk and accelerated metabolic aging. Now, let's address the bromelain argument. Yes, pineapple contains bromelain, an enzyme studied for anti-inflammatory and digestive effects. But the concentrations used in clinical research are far higher than what you obtain from a casual serving of fruit. Again, the metabolic cost must be weighed against the benefit. And here's the pattern you should now recognize. Bananas, watermelon, grapes, and pineapple share a common theme: relatively high sugar delivery with limited metabolic buffering. After 60, buffering capacity matters. If you are metabolically robust, meaning you lift weights 3-4 times per week, maintain high muscle mass, sleep consistently, and keep fasting glucose in the 80s, occasional pineapple is unlikely to cause harm. But if you are sedentary, carrying central adiposity, experiencing rising A1C, struggling with fatigue or brain fog, then frequent high glycemic fruits may be quietly amplifying the problem. Here's the practical protocol. Avoid fruit juices entirely, especially pineapple juice. Limit pineapple to rare occasions and never consume it alone. Pair with protein or fat if eaten. Consider replacing it with lower glycemic, polyphenol-rich fruits, which we're about to discuss. And here's the bigger takeaway. The goal is not to fear fruit. The goal is to match fruit choice to metabolic capacity. Now that we've examined 4 fruits that can challenge aging physiology, we're shifting gears. Because there are fruits that actively support insulin sensitivity, vascular health, mitochondrial repair, and cognitive longevity, now we shift from what to limit to what to leverage, because some fruits don't just avoid harm, they actively support metabolic repair. Let's begin with one of the most powerful fruits for men over 60, blueberries. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat blueberries. Unlike the high-sugar fruits we discussed earlier, blueberries are relatively low in glycemic load and extremely rich in polyphenols, particularly anthocyanins. These compounds are not just antioxidants in a vague sense. They interact directly with cellular signaling pathways involved in inflammation, mitochondrial function, and insulin sensitivity. What the research shows is that anthocyanin-rich berries are associated with improved endothelial function and better insulin response. Several clinical studies have demonstrated improved vascular elasticity and reduced oxidative stress markers after consistent berry consumption. Now let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your mitochondria, the energy generators inside your cells, as tiny engines. Over time, oxidative stress acts like rust, accumulating inside those engines. Blueberry polyphenols help reduce that oxidative rust, allowing your cells to produce energy more efficiently. And after 60, mitochondrial efficiency is everything. It influences energy levels, muscle recovery, cognitive clarity, metabolic flexibility. But there's more. Blueberries appear to support nitric oxide production, which improves blood vessel dilation. That means better circulation to the brain, heart, and muscles. In men, improved endothelial function directly correlates with cardiovascular and erectile health. Now here's the key difference from the fruits we eliminated. The sugar load of blueberries is modest relative to their polyphenol density. In other words, the benefit to sugar ratio is favorable, but context still matters. Here is the practical protocol I recommend. Portion, 1 tar 2 to 1 cup maximum. Frequency, 3 tar 5 times per week. Timing, best consumed earlier in the day or after resistance training. Pairing, combine with protein, for example, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or a protein smoothie, to blunt glucose response. Even better, consume frozen wild blueberries. They often contain higher anthocyanin concentrations and are picked at peak ripeness. Now, this is critical. Blueberries are not magic. If you continue overeating refined carbohydrates, sleeping 5 hours per night, and avoiding strength training, no fruit will rescue you. But when blueberries are layered into a metabolically supportive lifestyle, adequate protein, resistance training, time-restricted eating, they amplify repair. If this kind of physiology first breakdown is helpful, consider subscribing. I share practical, evidence-based strategies like this consistently to help you build strength and longevity naturally. The big principle here is this: We're not chasing sweetness, we're chasing cellular resilience. Now let's talk about a fruit that is often underestimated because it's small, tart, and not particularly sweet: raspberries. If blueberries are protective, raspberries are metabolically strategic. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat raspberries. Raspberries are extremely high in fiber, roughly 8 grams per cup, while remaining relatively low in total sugar compared to most fruits. That fiber does something profound in men over 60. It slows glucose absorption, and when glucose enters slowly, insulin rises gently rather than sharply. That difference may seem small in the moment, but over years, it becomes enormous. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine pouring water into a funnel. If you dump it all at once, it overflows. That overflow is your blood sugar spike. But if you pour slowly, the system handles it efficiently. That's what fiber does. It regulates flow. Now here's the deeper layer. Raspberries contain ellagic acid and other polyphenols that have been studied for their anti-inflammatory and insulin-sensitizing properties. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, is one of the primary drivers of metabolic decline after 60. What the research shows is that higher dietary fiber intake is strongly associated with improved metabolic markers, lower cardiovascular risk, and better gut microbiome diversity. And the gut microbiome matters more than most men realize. Your gut bacteria influence inflammation levels, insulin sensitivity, immune resilience, even testosterone metabolism. When you consume high-fiber, polyphenol-rich fruits like raspberries, you feed beneficial bacteria. Those bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, which support gut lining integrity and reduce systemic inflammation. Now pause and think about the contrast. High-fructose fruits overload the liver. High-fiber fruits nourish the gut. Different pathways, different outcomes. Here's the practical protocol. Portion: 1 to 2 to 1 cup. Frequency: 3 to 5 times per week. Timing: ideal in the morning or post-workout. Pair with protein and healthy fat. For example, raspberries with plain Greek yogurt and chia seeds. If you're practicing time-restricted eating, raspberries are an excellent first meal option because they provide fiber and phytonutrients without excessive glucose load. And here's something powerful. Many men notice improved digestion, reduced bloating, and more stable energy within weeks of increasing fiber-rich berries. That's not coincidence. That's metabolic recalibration. The key lesson here is this. After 60, your goal is not just blood sugar control. It's inflammation control. It's gut integrity. It's mitochondrial preservation. Raspberries check all 3 boxes. Now let's move to a fruit that completely changes the metabolic equation: avocado. Yes, avocado is technically a fruit, but metabolically, it behaves very differently from the fruits we've discussed so far. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat avocado. Unlike high-sugar fruits, avocado contains minimal sugar and is rich in monounsaturated fats, particularly oleic acid. It's also loaded with potassium, magnesium, and fiber, nutrients that play direct roles in blood pressure regulation, insulin sensitivity, and muscle function. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. If sugar-heavy fruits are like tossing kindling onto a fire, fast burn, fast spike, avocado is like adding stable logs. It burns slowly and supports sustained energy. After 60, metabolic stability is more valuable than metabolic stimulation. What the research shows is that monounsaturated fats improve insulin sensitivity and reduce markers of inflammation. Diets rich in these fats, like Mediterranean-style dietary patterns, are consistently associated with lower cardiovascular risk and improved longevity markers. But here's something even more important for men over 60. Avocado helps blunt glucose response when eaten with carbohydrates. In controlled studies, adding avocado to a meal reduces post-meal insulin spikes. That means if you do consume carbohydrates, even berries, pairing them with avocado can stabilize the hormonal response. And remember, insulin control is not just about diabetes prevention. It's about preserving fat-burning ability. It's about protecting endothelial function. It's about maintaining testosterone levels. Chronic hyperinsulinemia suppresses lipolysis. your body's ability to access stored fat. It also increases aromatase activity in visceral fat tissue, which converts testosterone into estrogen, stabilize insulin, and you protect hormonal balance. Now, let's look at the mineral aspect. Avocado is rich in potassium, a mineral that supports blood pressure regulation and vascular relaxation. Many older adults are potassium deficient, particularly if they consume processed foods or use certain medications. Improved potassium intake supports healthy blood pressure, improved muscle contraction, better nerve signaling, reduced cardiovascular strain. Here's the practical protocol. Portion: 1-2 to 1 avocado per day. Timing: with your largest meal, especially if carbohydrates are included. Pairing: combine with eggs, salmon, lean meat, or a large salad. Avoid pairing with high refined carb meals. Keep it within a whole food framework. If you're practicing intermittent fasting, avocado is an excellent first meal food because it provides satiety without triggering a sharp insulin rise. And here's the powerful takeaway. Avocado doesn't just avoid harm, it actively stabilizes metabolism. For many men over 60, replacing one high-sugar fruit serving with half an avocado daily can meaningfully improve triglycerides and post-meal glucose stability over time. We are shifting from sweetness-driven eating to stability-driven eating. Now, the final fruit we'll discuss may surprise you even more because it offers something rare in nutrition: a measurable impact on insulin sensitivity and visceral fat reduction when used strategically. And understanding this one may completely change how you think about fruit timing. Now let's talk about the final fruit. And this one is powerful not because it's low in sugar, but because of how it interacts with insulin and fat metabolism when used strategically. Grapefruit. Yes, grapefruit contains natural sugars. But unlike many high glycemic fruits, grapefruit has been studied for its impact on insulin sensitivity and visceral fat. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Grapefruit contains flavonoids, particularly naringenin, which has been shown in metabolic research to influence lipid metabolism and improve insulin signaling pathways. Naringenin appears to activate AMPK, an energy-sensing enzyme, sometimes referred to as the metabolic master switch. When AMPK is activated, your body shifts toward fat oxidation rather than fat storage. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of AMPK as a thermostat for energy balance. When it's activated, your cells behave as if they're in an energy-demanding state, increasing fat burning and improving glucose uptake efficiency. That's one reason exercise is so powerful. It activates AMPK. Certain compounds in grapefruit appear to support that same pathway. Now, what does the research show?